Okay, so I'm picking up exactly where I left off in the last scene. I haven't skipped anything. So let's go ahead and continue here with the flamethrower. Alright, so the next thing we need to do is create an emitter for the ice particles that are going to go ahead and represent the flames coming out of the barrel of the flamethrower here. So we'll go to primitive, we'll go to polygon mesh and create ourselves another disk. Disks just work great for this kind of thing. So here's my disk. Let me move it up and I want to rotate it about 90 degrees this way. So it's facing the direction that I want my particles to go in. And I'm just going to go ahead and roughly place it right in front of the barrel of my flamethrower here. Okay, so I can go in right about here is good. And in terms of the size, you can make it fit the entire size there of the flamethrower barrel. That's perfectly fine. And the next thing I want to do is hit enter and rename this disk emitter to flame emitter, just to keep things nice and organized. Okay, perfect. Now it's time to go ahead and make this thing emit some particles. So with the flame emitter selected, I'll go over to the simulate menu, go to ice, create, emit particles from selection. Alright, when the PPG opens up, let's rename this. Call it flame point cloud. Again, to keep things nice and organized. Okay, so there's our particles flying out. Obviously, that's no good for the moment. So with the point cloud selected, hit Alt and 9 to open up the ice tree. And here we go. Now it's time to start creating this ice tree for these flames. Okay, so first things first, let's open up the emit from surface compound and start to adjust some of these parameters around. So I'm going to take the rate and I'm going to increase it to about 1,000 just so we have a lot more particles here. And the size I'm not going to worry about too much right now. I'm going to change the shape from point to sphere. And the speed, I want this to be pretty fast. So let's increase the speed to about 20 just to see what we get. And let me close that. And what I want to also do is kill off my particles after an age limit. So let's open up the preset manager here and go to set. I want to grab myself a set particle age limit. I also want to grab myself a delete particle at age limit node because I want to go ahead and delete particles when they reach their age limit. So just like before, we'll connect this right here and we'll take the delete particle at age limit, plug it into port 2 right there, and now we have control over the age limit of our particles. So let's play the simulation, and this is what we have. Not too great. At the moment, I'm not using the little torch simulation down here, so here's what I'm going to do for that. I'm going to go back into the ice tree, and I'll hit the refresh button here, and here's the ice tree view for the torch effect, right? So I'll open up the emit from surface compound, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this emit from surface enable parameter, and I'll turn that off. And essentially what that does is, now if I go back and play this, the torch effect won't work anymore. It's temporarily muted, so to speak. So I'll select the point cloud for the flames. I'll go back into the ice tree and refresh this. So there we go, we can get back to work. Okay, good to go. Now let's go ahead and continue adjusting some of these parameters. And that's a speed of about, what was that? That's a speed of about 20. Okay, that's perfectly fine for the moment. We probably will end up changing that later anyway. Alright, if I look at my particle age limit node here, you'll notice that the age limit is 4. I don't want it to be that way. I want the fire to kind of have this sort of randomized effect at the end of its lifespan. I don't want it to be uniform the way that the torch effect is, because it's a fire, and face it, what fire does that? So you'll see what I mean in a moment. What I want to do is open up the preset manager, and let's start to type in the word turb for turbulize. And what I want to do is grab myself a turbulize value by range, which is right here. I'm going to drag and drop that in here, close the preset manager, and here we go. Okay, I want about 3 of these turbulize value by range nodes or compounds. So I'm going to take this one, I'm going to hit Control C to copy, then I'll hit Control V to paste it once, Control V to paste it twice. So now I have 3 of them set up. What I want to do is connect this first one over here, the value output. I want to connect it into the input for the age limit on the set particle age limit node. Okay, now let's go ahead and open up its PPG here to see what we can change. All right, so here's my PPG, and what I want to do is put the minimum value here. The minimum value is going to represent the lowest value for the lifespan of the particles. The max value will represent the maximum lifespan. So if I were to set this to say 2 and 5, what this tells ICE is make some of the particles go as low as a value of 2 seconds. So some particles will last at the fastest 2 seconds. Other particles at the longest will last 5 seconds. And it'll sort of be a little bit randomized. And particles can have any value in between these two numbers. So some particles might have a lifespan of 3 or 4 or 3.5 or something like that. Any number in between, basically. Now the turbulence scale, I want to go ahead and drop that down to about 0.1 because I don't want the effect to be too strong. I want it to be pretty subtle. I want to also turn on the animated parameter, and in the animation speed I want to increase it because 0.02 is too low, so I'll put it to something like 0.1 just to increase it a bit, but that won't be such a dramatic increase to the point where it's going to make the particles too radical, which is not what I want to do. I want to make the effect subtle and not too strong. So let's go back and let's play this again, and let me zoom out here so I can see what's going on. And you can see here's my particles. That's how far they're lasting. You can see some of them last longer and some of them die off shorter here. That's exactly the effect I'm going for. But of course this is far from looking like flames at the moment. So we'll still have to make a whole bunch of changes. This is going to end up being a pretty complex ice tree here. Not too complex, but the most complex ice tree we've tackled so far for the duration of this entire training tutorial. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use these two nodes here, these turbulized value by range nodes, to control the minimum value and the maximum value here from this turbulized value by range compound. The reason I'm doing that is to complicate things a little bit more, make things a little bit more random, and make things a little bit more complex. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to take this first one up here, I'm going to plug it into the min value. I'm going to take the second one down here and plug it into the max value. Okay, so now I can control the min and max value using these nodes up here. So in this in the first node, which is the one up here, okay, what I want to do is take the minimum value and set it to 1. I'm going to take the max value and set that to about 2.5, 2.5. I'm going to leave the rest of these parameters alone for the moment. And then I'm going to go ahead and close that. I'm going to take the second one here, and let's take the minimum value and put that one to about 2.5 and the max value to about 3.5. So this is going to introduce more randomness and less uniformity, so to speak, in our simulation. So now if we open this up, you'll notice we no longer have a min-max value. That's because the min and max value are being determined by these two nodes over here, these two turbulized value by range compounds. So let's close this. That's perfectly fine. So now we're going to have a more randomized effect. Let's go ahead and have a look at that. And there we go. A little bit more randomness. It's a very subtle effect, very hard to see with the naked eye, but it's there, and it does make a difference in the end. So let's go ahead and stop that simulation. Let's go back into our ice tree, and we have a lot more nodes that we have to plug and connect here. So let's start to get a little bit organized. I'm going to click on this little icon here with the three gray bars just to collapse that, make it as small as possible. Right now I don't need all these nodes taking up space, so I'll just move them down here. Okay. What I want to do is I want to control the particle size, because if we see the particles now, you notice that they're too small. I want the particles to start off real small here, not too small, but a bit smaller here, and then suddenly just flare up and get into these big balls of fire over here at the end. So how can we do that? Let's go to the preset manager and grab ourselves a special little compound that allows us to do that. Let's type in the word modify, and you know what? Just that because this would be probably your first time doing this, I'll just go down here to the modifiers category, because this is where you'll find this node. Okay, after you get used to the nodes and you get more experience, you can start to use this search box a little bit more effectively. So over here you'll see modify particle size. I'm going to go ahead and drag and drop that over here. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and plug this into my ice tree, but no more room over here. Well, let's right click on top of port 2 and click on insert port before, so I can have an open port before 1 and 3. Okay, so let me take the modified particle node and connect it right there to the ice tree. Perfect. Okay, now if we open this up, you notice what we get here is some simple parameters, and then we get this curve, this F curve that we can use to control the effect. And that's essentially what we want to do. So let's come up here to the source parameter and switch from the default age to age percentage, because I want the age percentage to control how big or small these particles are going to be. All right, let's take the first keyframe here. I'm going to right click and select key properties, and I want the frame to be 0, but I want to change the value to something bigger. Let's try something like 1.25. Okay, now you notice that my F curve changed. I want to go ahead and take the last keyframe and change that one as well. So let's right click, go to key properties, and what I'm going to do is change the value to something pretty big, like say 14. Okay, so now if I close that and I look at my F curve here, the particles are pretty small and then they get big. But I want to regulate this a little bit better, because if I go ahead and collapse this, go back and play the simulation, this is what I have, and obviously this doesn't look too great, right? So we need to control and regulate this a little bit better. Alright, so let me go back to the F curve here. What I want to do is maybe add one more keyframe here to control this a little bit better. So to do that, I have to make sure that the curve is actually selected. Then I'll click on this little button here with the plus icon, which adds a keyframe anywhere I want. So I'll just click anywhere, and there we go. Now I'll click back on this arrow icon or hit the space bar to go back to key selection mode, and now I can move this key wherever I want. So let's take this keyframe, right click on top of it and go to the key properties, and let's change it to a size of about 12, and let's place its frame location at about 0.9. Let me close that. So here it is. I can also grab these selection handles here to control the function curves, the actual curve of the function curve. So I'll do something like this. It doesn't have to be perfect, but something like this just to give it a little bit of a notch here, just to kind of give us a different effect for the size. And maybe I'll move this keyframe over just a little bit like that. Again, you don't have to be totally precise or perfect or anything like that. Just so long as you place these keys roughly the way I have them, the effect should work for you pretty good. Then we have this multiplier parameter down here, which is set to 1. I don't want that multiplier parameter to be uniform and set to 1. I want it to have a little bit of randomness to it. So to do that, we'll just go over here and Control C to copy this turbulized value by range node and just paste it over here so we can keep reusing it. This avoids having to go back to the preset manager every single time. So I'm going to take this value output and connect it to the multiplier of the modified particle size. Now let's open up the turbulized node here to see what we can change. Let's take the minimum value for the multiplier and place it at about 0.5, and take the max value and place that to 1.5. And the turbulence, maybe I'll drop that a little bit, and let's make it animated just to give this a little bit more randomness. Let's increase the animation speed to something pretty drastic like 2. Now if we go back and we play this again, now we get sort of this jittering effect, or more randomness. You can see here we have a more jittering effect, and it's not so uniform anymore, which is more like the behavior of fire, because fire tends to do that, jitters and kind of randomly moves about and such. So this will add that effect to our flamethrower. But of course this effect still doesn't look too great, because we're actually not even really close to finishing up here. Let's plug in maybe one more node, and then I'll end the video and we'll continue on in another one. What we want to do also is change the particles spin. We want to make sure the particles spin. We don't want them just to go straight into space. We want them to sort of spin, so they have some kind of velocity, some kind of rotation to them. So let's go to the preset manager. Let's go to the orientation category, and what we want to do is grab ourselves a spin particle node or compound. Let's bring it down here. And I want to place it right after we modify the particle size. So we see here that we have port 3 is after port 2. So let's right click on it and click on insert port before. And now we can plug our spin particles right there. Now let's go ahead and open this up and see what we can change. And actually, before we change anything, let me go ahead and show you what's going on here. Okay, let's have a look at these particles. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to play the simulation slowly using the right arrow key on the keyboard. I can go frame by frame. You can if you look closely, you can notice that the particles are in fact spinning. Right now they're actually tumbling. So we can change and control the way that these things spin. So let's change the spin axis over here. Select spin axis from tumble to spiral. And if you go ahead and play through this slowly, you can see the effect. Now they're spiraling almost like a football or something like that, or a bullet. And now let's take the input axis and we can control on which axis these particles are gonna spin on. Right now it's set to the y-axis, so that's why they're spinning like this, kind of counterclockwise. Okay. What we can do is we can add some spin over here to the x. So let's put in 0.5, and maybe for the z we'll put in 1. And now if we go back and we play this again slowly, frame by frame, you notice that it has more of a random kind of spin. It's spinning in all kinds of different axes here. Okay. We'll leave the spin rate at 0.5. That's perfectly fine. That'll work out just great. Let me close that. And there we go. We just added some spin to our particles. But we're still far from finished. And this video has been running long enough. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to end it here. And we'll pick up and finish off this simulation effect in the next video.